set for another week of NFL Goal Line Live. It's a Tuesday night edition as we break down Johnny Manziel and his decision to miss Manning passing camp over in mid-July, along with the rookie, boom, or bust. We have all the predictions along with much more next in the NFL Goal Line with Nick and Andrew. Welcome inside the NFL Goal Line Live studios. Thank you guys for joining us on a Tuesday night edition of NFL Goal Line. Typically we're on Monday night, but we had scheduling issues, so we were unable to bring you guys your weekly dose of NFL football, but we're glad to bring it to you on a Tuesday night edition. Thank you for joining us. This is Nick Rice alongside Andrew Goldstein. Our phone number for tonight's broadcast is 951-515-4552. We have a very jam-packed show today. We're going to discuss rookie boom or bust around the National Football League, including diving into the top 100 of the National Football League on NFL Network, the top 100 players of 2013. We're going to dive into numbers 100 to 75. It'll be a 4-week-long process. We postponed the AFC divisional winner predictions for next weekend. If you followed us, we started with the NFC. We'll move over to the AFC. It's just a quick preview, as we have yet to have any football played, not even training camps. That is set for this coming week for most rookies and for the veterans. That will be a week from Monday, just 6 days away. Very, very interesting headlines in the National Football League. But we start over in the NCAA, believe it or not, with the Johnny Manziel situation. And I typically link this to a similar situation to guys that face a culture shock and have a fork in the road, if I may say, with their lives and their decision-making. Typically a guy that is well brought up, parented throughout his youth in the correct way, always led to the right path, has been surrounded by terrific people. Typically, when there's a culture shock similar to what a celebrity faces when he or she enters the limelight of Hollywood or under the big screen, typically one of two things happen. Either the culture shock gets into their head and they build a tremendous ego, and it drives them the wrong way. They become arrogant and start making decisions by themselves that are plain stupid and don't really show any sense of progressivism and shows a complete lack of awareness of their surroundings. One of two things happened in the last couple of years to the Heisman Trophy winner. Tim Tebow a few years ago, the former Florida Gator, won the Heisman Trophy, and following that, vocally spoke out about his faith and was a very positive impact in his community and was nothing but a positive sign for NFL teams. Reason why the the Broncos, rose up to pick him in the draft. However, a similar situation may not be the case for Johnny Manziel. Obviously, a more talented overall quarterback, but a guy that maturity-wise needs to grow up a little bit. It's the sophomore Texas A&M quarterback. And Andrew, I just believe that this is a situation where the QB is setting himself up to fail with all these off-the-field issues. He pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge early on in the month, and just things have gone south for this quarterback, formerly known as one of the top 2 or 3 quarterback prospects going into the National Football League in the coming years. Johnny Football has really shook some heads in the last week or so, and really he needs to get his act together. Otherwise, this may be a rugged NFL pursuit for the sophomore QB.
Well, I should probably explain. Well, first of all, there's a little bit of an echo on my computer. Oh, it's gone. Never mind. Just some technical difficulties, but I should probably explain what's been going on with Johnny Manziel this specific week for people who aren't in the know. Essentially, what happened is he was a guest counselor at the Manning passing camp, obviously a camp for young QBs, typically high school players, run by the Manning brothers. And Johnny Manziel was a counselor at this camp, and he decided to go home early. And frankly, it disappointed a lot of people who paid good money to learn from him. And this isn't the first time he's been involved in some controversy related to this camp. He showed up late on a number of the days, and even though the Mannings have said publicly that there's no issue that he went home early because he was dehydrated, the public has really started to take this as a sign that Manziel really isn't mature enough to go into the NFL. And I feel like when you start getting famous, when you start winning the Heisman and being involved with celebrities and partying, you start being surrounded by yes men. And what I mean by that are people who just say yes to anything you want. Like, for instance, you saw Manziel earlier this year playing 18, 19 holes at Pebble Beach. That course really isn't available to college kids, not available to most people. It's a very exclusive club, but you have people saying yes and admitting him. You have, obviously, him going home early from the camp. That's not necessarily something that's going to endear you to the Manning brothers or NFL talent evaluators, but he has this kind of nucleus of people around him who are just telling him, yes, that's okay, including his father, who cited dehydration as the reason why he went home from the camp early. So I feel like all of this is just kind of building to a critical mass, and we should mention that while he's been out clubbing, while he's been out partying, not once have we heard anything about football and Johnny Manziel since January, and it's July, and as you know, practices start in August. So I haven't seen any pictures of him in the gym. I haven't seen any reports about him working out or really getting in shape. Every single report I've heard is about him hitting the club with Rob Gronkowski or something. So I feel like this is a very alarming sign. What do you think?
I believe it is an alarming sign, but what does scratch my head and adds a new dynamic to this already complex story, starting with the misdemeanor charge just a few days ago for this quarterback, Peyton Manning, the Denver Bronco quarterback, came to Johnny Manziel's defense, also saying that he understands the missing and showing up late for the assignments, and he said he absolutely enjoyed meeting with Johnny. And the report also includes the fact that for not only Peyton Manning, but many people involved in the camp really enjoyed his presence during the times that he was there. Multiple reports confirming this. I believe him being a counselor was nothing but a positive thing, and Manning also emphasizes that he wishes him back next year. A conflicting argument here, because we're looking at two different sides here. We're looking at the outside media claiming that he is not yet mature and ready for the limelight, and I would have to agree here. But we're also looking at a different aspect where the Bronco quarterback, Peyton Manning, emphasized that he was a pleasure while he was there, and he definitely wants him back next year. But when I mentioned the fact that he's been partying and he's been out late, not focusing on football, you don't see the guys like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers going out late at night doing these sort of things, creating headlines. Which is why, sure, it may not be a huge issue here, especially before we even put on the pads. But this is an alarming issue. Sure, there's conflicting headlines, but I think Manning may have the effort to more be at his defense versus trying to convey the truth, especially when there's such a negative record on the former Heisman Trophy winner.
But think about it from Peyton Manning's perspective. He's made millions of dollars. He wants to maintain relationships with young QBs so he can use them in the future at the Manning Passing Academy as counselors. He's not interested in creating a media circus. Even if he wasn't pleasant and a pleasure to have at the camp, do you think Manning's going to say he sucked and I don't want him back here? No. He's going to say Johnny Manziel was a pleasure. And if he really despised the experience he had with Manziel, he won't invite him back next year, but he's not going to rip him to the press. That just goes against everything we know about Peyton Manning. So while he's defending him in public, that doesn't necessarily mean he had a great experience with Johnny Manziel.
Absolutely. Peyton Manning has a huge say in the NFL with just how terrific he's been over the years. This Johnny Manziel situation will definitely play itself out in the coming weeks and months. Peyton Manning is great for his play on the field, and obviously off the field has been a terrific character over the years. And he's one of the top players in the NFL, hands down. He was voted number 2 on the NFL Top 100 of 2013 last year, barely beat out by the most valuable player of the NFL. That was Adrian Peterson. We're going to take a 4-part series in this because the NFL Top 100 really was an interesting countdown, counting down the top 100 players, obviously. And it just shows how the players respect certain other players offensively and defensively in the National Football League, evaluating their talent and who better to vote for than players voting for players. And we're going to take numbers 100 through 75. Obviously, very interesting debate here. And we have a couple of guys we believe should be a little higher or a little lower on the countdown. And it just goes to show that maybe things aren't perfect, but who knows? Maybe we don't know a little something about NFL players.
I have an interesting idea here that I want to run by you to see if you like it.
Okay.
I feel like in addition to a top 100 list generated by the players, much in the same way that they did for the top 100 of all time list on NFL.com, I feel like there should be another top 100 list generated by the media, just so we could see what the players think and what the media thinks, how it's similar and how it's different. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I do think it's a very interesting countdown, but they do have something similar to that on NFL on the NFL.com website, where they compare the difference between what the fans think. Sure, it may not be the media, but in a sense it kind of is. Not many people know, but typically what the media brings up or talks about, and typically in some ways how the media is conveyed, is based off of fans. The media is not going to go well into detail on topics that fans don't even care about. Fans, in a way, dictate the media, so you could say there, in a sense, already is a countdown similar to that, but obviously a very interesting countdown would be nonetheless, of having a fan versus player situation there, comparing one and the other.
All right. So 100 through 75. Nick, give me one player on this list who's overrated, if any.
Well, first of all, to catch you guys up to speed, what I'm trying to search up real quick here is the top 100 list. And there's several players we believe are a little too high or a little too low. Some of the guys highlighted here on this top 100, a guy that...
I think we can all agree, number 77, Aaron Hernandez, a little too high right now.
Absolutely.
I think his stock pretty well tanked after this list came out.
Absolutely, man. Disappointing situation there. But another guy that tanked on the countdown was Maurice Jones-Drew, fell 86 spots down to number 98 on the list. There's a guy that switched teams but still should be very effective with his new ball club, the Seattle Seahawks wide receiver, Percy Harvin. And then a guy higher up on the list, Colin Kaepernick. There's a debate coming up on that. Andrew Goldstein has some in-depth topics on him. And then a guy I will quickly dive into is number 79 on the list, Luke Kuechly, who, believe it or not, and I took the hype early on in the year about the fact that he was leading the league in tackles and actually finished up with 163 tackles, which leads the league. But I believe he's too high on the list. I believe that the number 79 player in the game today should indeed be ranked a little bit lower on this list, the rookie linebacker for the Panthers. And in life, it sort of relates to this guy, to Luke Kuechly, where he specializes in one thing. It's very important in a lot of cases to specialize in something. Be great in something because it will indeed get you somewhere. And Luke Kuechly, who moved over to middle linebacker, certainly found his niche there because he's a fantastic talent a really athletic middle linebacker, underrated for how fast he is, but also led the league in tackles. Obviously, he's a terrific tackling machine. And the problem that I have with Kuechly is that he's just a one-trick pony, where he doesn't do a terrific job at covering or at rushing the passer. As we see statistically, he pales in comparison to a guy lower on the list by 7 spots, London Fletcher, who tallied up 2 more sacks than him and also had 5 INTs to Luke Kuechly's 1. Sure, we can go strictly based on statistics, but the film does not lie. I've seen that Luke Kuechly, sure, he may be limited to just a tackling machine, but it's just within the grand scheme of things, when you have a guy like London Fletcher with numerous pieces around him, and he still tallies up about as many tackles as Luke Kuechly versus the Panther linebacker, where he's running the show on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's very surprising that he doesn't have a bigger say in that defense, a D that actually ranked in the bottom half of the league, and London Fletcher, a terrific player, ranks lower than him on this list.
Well, it's very interesting that you should bring those people up, because I have another defensive player on this list that's very improperly rated, and this is before I even get to Colin Kaepernick, who are obviously an offensive player. I just wanted to get my brief tangent on this guy out of the way. Charles Woodson, number 85, should not be on this list. Shouldn't happen. Now, I'm definitely not debating Charles Woodson's legacy. Obviously, fantastic player, one of the true greats in NFL history. If we're debating all-time secondary, yeah, he belongs up there in the discussion. He should be. But if we're debating who the best players were from this past season, the 2012-2013 NFL season, it's not a discussion. Charles Woodson shouldn't be on the list. 7 games played, 1.5 sacks, 1 interception, and I believe he doesn't even rank in the top 50 in Football Outsiders' success rate percentage, and those are some sabermetric football stats that I happen to like. But Charles Woodson, he's here based on his reputation, and when I said we should let the media vote for stuff like this in addition to players, this is why, because a player's opinion is very skewed by legacy and by people who they've played in the past that have been great, which in turn affect their evaluations for this year. Woodson, he had a great career, but he was old, he was injured, and if you're asking me who the best players were in 2013, he doesn't belong on the list. He certainly doesn't bump off a guy like Charles Johnson, who had 12.5 sacks, nor does he bump off a guy like Brandon Browner. It's just preposterous that Charles Woodson, whose reputation was much, much better than his actual performance, was allowed on this list. I don't think it should have happened.
Yeah, you're telling me that he's one of the top 6 cornerbacks in the league today? I mean, there are plenty of guys.
Anymore. The Packers put him at safety for a lot of the time last year for the sole reason that he couldn't keep up with faster wide receivers anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a situation here where rookies with high notoriety, and obviously a guy like a 16-year pro in Charles Woodson, similar situation, just way too high ranked based on legacy alone rather than his play on the field. He'll probably be out of the league. Woodson is in maybe 1 year. I'm sure a 1 year stint with the Raiders will be about all we'll see out of Woodson.
Absolutely. Well, I actually had another player that's improperly rated, but this time it's underrated. Well, first of all, I think that Logan Mankins is underrated, but Nick gets annoyed whenever I start really praising offensive linemen, so I'm going to leave that one for another time.
Yeah, well, I think that Dan
Connolly and Nate Solder should be up here, too.
Right. I mean, I believe linemen need their credit, but how can you allude to stats when there really isn't any on linemen? There really isn't much patience to trying to track what offensive linemen do in the league, but go ahead.
Well, first of all, Mankins, veteran with the Pats, he knew a lot of the reason why Tom Brady is able to step back and throw it with a clean pocket is because of the adjustments that Mankins makes. And I know that players aren't going to vote an offensive lineman very high just for the reasons that you said. There's no statistical measure. But if you just really look at what he does, it's amazing. I think that Mankins should be higher, but that's a tough argument to make. But the one that isn't tough, 81, Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
That is a travesty. A travesty. He should be at least in the 50s, if not higher.
He's definitely, I mean, we look at the quarterbacks ahead of him. We'll just take a look real quick. The quarterback above him, Matthew Stafford, you could make a case based on his statistics alone, but then we look...
And this is why statistics really aren't a good picture of what a player can do sometimes. Sure, Stafford has the impressive passing stats, but the Lions throw it 65% of the time, by far more than anybody in the league. Out of anybody in the league, they had the most time that was classified as quote-unquote garbage time, which is being down by more than 2 touchdowns. And most of the time, Stafford was throwing it out of the shotgun to Calvin Johnson. Plays that are ordinarily going to bring you, if not wins, then certainly yards and touchdowns. So while Stafford's definitely impressive, his statistics really belie what he can actually do. Yeah. He's not a better player than Kaepernick, and he doesn't bring more to the offense than Colin Kaepernick does. And Nick, you hear when a rookie is struggling, you hear media members saying, oh, he just needs to learn the system. When you hear veteran quarterbacks being signed by a new team, media members say, oh, it's great because he's smart. He can learn the new system quickly. After Alex Smith got injured, the Niners overhauled their entire offense from a primarily conservative I formation dink and dunk thing to a zone read offense, incredibly complex, options, fakes, deep throws, all of that. And Colin Kaepernick learned it in the span of a week or two. Somehow, I think that deserves more recognition. 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions over a half of a season. Extrapolated out, 20 touchdowns, 8 interceptions over a full season if he played it. And he brought the Niners back from the brink of defeat in Atlanta, and he nearly did the same thing in the Super Bowl. Somehow, I feel like that's worthy of more recognition than number 81.
And not only that, but he was also asked to throw the ball more than people think. The Niners were a passing team with not a receiver that really stepped up to the plate. You could say Michael Crabtree sure led the team in catches, but there really wasn't a number 1 receiver. You had Randy Moss, you had Mario Manningham, a lot of number 2 receivers that he was throwing to. And to be quite honest with you, we could do a whole show on this. It's similar to a guy who's ranked way high on this list, Robert Griffin, who was just thrust into an offense that Mike Shanahan adjusted to his college scheme. Meanwhile, Kaepernick had to adjust to this new offense in a matter of a week or two, not an off season. He had to adjust in a matter of a week or two and immediately made a terrific impression, and you saw the passing game for the Niners. It was a whole new dimension with Kaepernick, and let's not forget, I believe Kaepernick led all the quarterbacks in rushing yards, if I'm not mistaken, during the second half of the year when he was actually playing. We may want to look that up during this debate here, but I believe Kaepernick,
I'll look it up.
Yeah, I believe Kaepernick did lead the league second half of the year in rushing yards. Point is, similar to Andrew Luck, which is why I believe Luck needs to be given way more credit, Kaepernick and Luck were thrown into offenses that didn't exactly fit their scheme when they were in college. They had to adjust to this game and also were asked to pass the ball a lot and really made plays with their opportunities. On top of that, a guy like Stafford, his win-loss record is atrocious. Meanwhile, Kaepernick won a pass in the fourth quarter that could have won the Super Bowl for him, and then obviously Andrew Luck, deep in the playoffs with a vastly under-talented team. We'll go into the Luck situation next week. I believe he's later on the list. No, a couple weeks from now. But I don't know if you have the stat up yet, but Kaepernick, I believe,
I can't find second half rushing yards, but I can find overall rushing yards. And obviously RG3 and Cam Newton are way ahead of him because they played a full season, but he is 60 or 70 yards behind Russell Wilson, and Russell played a full season. He has 413 rushing yards, I believe. That is Colin Kaepernick. So if you expanded that out over an entire season, that would be more than RG3.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
So if you essentially doubled his rushing yards because he played, I believe, 8 games.
And also, let's throw out stats out for a moment here. When we're talking about best players of 2013, we're thinking of what player would you put on your team today to give you the best chance to win. Sure, we're going into Kaepernick versus RG3, but let's think about it real quick. Who would you put 2 minutes to go at, or let's go full game here, but similar to what a quarterback wins or loses by, 2-minute warning, who would you put under center? Kaepernick, who has a run-pass option, and let's not forget, he also is a very durable quarterback who doesn't get hit a lot, versus Robert Griffin, injury-prone, barely stays on the field, even his rookie season, and quite frankly, he would only be asked to throw the ball 12 to 15 times a game for most of his career in the first season. I believe, hands down, it has to go to Kaepernick, a guy who also was just as successful, if not better, than RG3 in the final 2 minutes.
Well, RG3 is ranked 60 spots above Kaepernick, about 60 spots, like you said a couple of minutes ago. Do you think that this is just ignorance on the part of the people who voted for it, just that they hadn't seen Kaepernick for a full season? Or do you think it was a respect issue? Do you think that people like and respect RG3 more, and that's why he got a higher rating?
Yeah, it's more respect because you see a guy like Robert Griffin was embraced all season long with the Redskins. Meanwhile, Colin Kaepernick, we see in the offseason Colin Kaepernick's ego and in his... This ego situation, too, can't necessarily be a bad thing. We always connotate ego as a bad thing, as a negative sign, as a watch out, a warning sign whenever a guy has an ego. You see Robert Griffin, he's a more humble guy that just goes out and performs. And also, I mean, his statistics may show that he's in the rankings with Colin Kaepernick, but he doesn't throw the ball as much as Kaepernick. And it just seemed like Colin with all the tattoos and, here, the offense is about me. He was a more egotistical, outgoing guy. It rubbed some guys the wrong way. I'm sure that's how the perception was among players on Kaepernick versus Robert Griffin.
All right. Well, that was... Oh.
We're having some echo issues here, but... It seems to me that the top 100 list...
There's something going on in the background.
Right, okay. Well, we fixed that, though. It seems like, for the most part, the top 100 list is fairly accurate. There's a number of guys I believe are where they really should be. I do believe, though, real quick before we move on here, is that Darrell Washington, number 94 on the list, I think he was the top 2 or 3 inside linebackers in the league. We're talking... I guess I'm going defense here the whole time, but... the whole show here, but I believe that not only London Fletcher, but also Darrell Washington, guys that really didn't really shine up to the spotlight. The NFL didn't really put the limelight down on these players, yet Darrell Washington and London Fletcher, I believe, are among the top 3 or 4 greatest linebackers in the game today. I can't really name too many other linebackers other than Patrick Willis, the Patrick Willises and maybe the Navarro Bowmans of the league. Other than those, I mean, I believe I can put a huge case as London Fletcher or Darrell Washington being the next great linebacker in the NFL. And I mean, just look at the statistics. They really don't lie. Top 5 in not only tackles, but also picks and sacks as well. Do we have Andrew on the other line, though, to wrap up the show here? Awesome.
Yes, you do. There's a little bit of an echo problem there, but I fixed it. There was something over on my end that was causing the glitch, so I just kind of X'd the window out. But before we end the show, we have a third segment we wanted to do for our listeners. NFL rookies, boom and bust. You want to start us off, Nick?
Absolutely, man. I mean, because I do everything around here. But anyways, we'll get going with
come on. That's not fair, man.
Dog, I mean, dude, look at what's going on your end. I mean, you're just falling apart over there with your computer and everything over here.
Come on. I just had a little bit of an internet connectivity problem, and we got it all cleared up.
All right, well, there's a reason why I'm the host and you're not. So we're going with the rookie booms or busts.
Listeners, do you see what I have to deal with here? Man, I ought to be canonized for having to deal with this guy every week.
Oh, man. We just enjoy having you guys joining us here. 951-515-4552 is the phone number. And we'll get going with our final segment. If we could have someone chime in, that'd be terrific. But if not, it's the 1-2 punch that definitely gives you guys insight around the National Football League. But the rookie booms or busts. This is a very interesting topic. We can go way more in depth. We'll probably extend a little bit here just to have more elaboration on this topic because it is a very interesting headline among the booms or busts of the league. And, I mean, to give you background on booms or busts, typically an NFL team will just recognize within the first few weeks of training camp whether they really whiffed on a guy or if they just nailed a great pick or picked up a terrific guy who you can plug in immediately, an amazing talent who just happened to be underrated. Last year was Russell Wilson. The Seahawks saw immediately that Russell Wilson was was head and heels above what Matt Flynn brought to the table for the quarterback position. And you'll see also guys that come in the league and were just drafted way too high. I believe that situation will happen with a few players. And it all starts with the number 3 overall pick, Dion Jordan, the rookie defensive end for the Miami Dolphins, a guy that was woefully overvalued. I believe he wasn't even the greatest defensive lineman coming into the draft. Similar situation with Jarvis Jones. I believe he was more what the Dolphins and Steelers found as a scheme fit. As a guy with James Harrison out, we'll just plug Jarvis Jones right in. Sure, he may not be the best talent, but I believe but the fact that we have a team need here that he will be able to perform well. I'm never a big fan of a team need guy, a team that just drafts a guy, reaches for a player just because he fits a need. And I believe Jarvis Jones and Dion Jordan fit the bill very well. Statistically, not outstanding. Dion Jordan, also a guy very raw coming out of college. And Andrew has insight on his 2 players as well. Very raw NFL players coming out of the college game. And I'm not really a big fan of team need. I'm more of a fan of a guy that is the best talent on the board. A lot of the top teams in the league consistently draft talent over need.
All right, well, here are my 2 busts. Number 1, Ziggy Ansah, Detroit Lions. Let me tell you, the scouting report on this guy was that he had stamina problems. Scouts observed him at some of the rookie workouts and some of the senior day scrimmages. He was huffing and puffing and coming over to the sidelines for water after every couple of downs. Is that really somebody you want out there every single time in the NFL? I mean, obviously, he has great measurables. He's very technically raw, but all you have are the measurables and the athleticism with this guy. That's it. And eventually, those measurables are only going to carry a player so far, and he's going to need to polish his game. So the Lions might have hit a home run with Ansah. They might have struck out. And if you have a guy who's really raw and who just isn't accustomed to the speed of the game, as some scouts have said that Ansah isn't, the tendency is more towards strikeout than home run. For every one Jason Pierre-Paul, you're going to get a couple of Tony Mandariches.
Very interesting comparison there. Wow, I feel right inside. Right inside your argument.
I'm telling you, when we did the Johnny Manziel segment, I was about to compare Johnny Manziel to Ken Stabler. Do not test me on my antique football references.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
But second bust, E.J. Manuel, Buffalo Bills. There's an article about him on Football Outsiders, and just as a side note, you should definitely go to the Football Outsiders site. They have great stuff on there. But the guy writing the article, it was about projections for rookie quarterbacks of this year, according to some of their advanced statistics. And he said that he's read conflicting scouting reports that compare E.J. Manuel to Blaine Gabbert and Terrell Pryor. He wrote that was sort of like saying that something tasted like steak and jelly beans. But he made his point. If you're being compared to one of them, let alone both, that's really a bad sign for how your career's going to turn out. So I just don't know what the Bills saw in E.J. Manuel. You want to talk about reaching for a need? They didn't just reach a couple of spots like the Steelers did. They reached
They stretched across the Grand Canyon to grab E.J. Manuel. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a similar situation to what I referenced with Deion Jordan and Jarvis Jones. A team need far before it's a scheme fit or it's a talent issue. I believe the Bills in that situation should have traded down, got more picks, because let's be honest, the Bills are one of the least talented teams in the league. And I was just about to go into Blaine Gabbert comparisons as well. A very high reach player, because he wasn't even regarded as the greatest quarterback out of the draft class. And it turns out that, let's be honest, maybe Geno Smith, despite the arrogance issues, talent-wise, is head and shoulders above a guy like E.J. Manuel, who wasn't even supposed to be in the first round, let alone the top quarterback drafted in the 2013 NFL Draft.
Well, let's hope so, for the sake of my New York Jets. But we actually have two other types of rookies for you to close out the segment and thus our show. We're going to be giving you our rookie booms. People who are going to do better than projected and are really going to stand out in their rookie year. So, Nick, if you please.
Absolutely. And I think the corner that the Jets drafted 9th overall, I think he will be a solid player, just a terrific pickup.
D. Milliner.
Yeah, D. Milliner. Yeah, I was forgetting the name. I don't know about the D tackle, though. That's just you plug it in, and where is he going to play? But to go on our topic here, the top guys that I believe will make a huge impact. One of them comes from my hometown of San Diego. Manti Te'o, his quote-unquote character issues and off-the-field impact certainly hurt his draft stock, but the Chargers, very smart, waited until the second round and traded up just a few spots, only had to give up a third-round pick for next year to draft Manti Te'o, and in my mind, not only with reports about him being a very impressive pickup for the Chargers, but I believe skill-wise, he could plug in and be one of the top linebackers in the league rookie season. Now, that's a huge, absolute, that's taking a stretch right now, especially for mini camps. No pads on quite yet, but skill-wise and his talent in all but one game during his senior year at college, obviously the BCS bowl game definitely hurt his stock a little bit. But I do believe that based off of reports on his impressive play at minicamp, I think he will be. And also his character. He's been a terrific character with the girlfriend hoax issue. You haven't heard any sort of negative comments. He's been very smart about holding the situation. Similar to a guy like Tavon Austin. You plug him in, and I believe he'll be a huge talent. He fell in the draft a little bit based off of size, but his production does not lie. He will be a huge plug-in. And for a Rams team, without Steven Jackson trying to transfer to that passing type of team, I believe you plug in Tavon Austin to that already pretty stellar receiving core. I think the Rams will be a very interesting team offensively with a couple of guys that can certainly burn you deep. Tavon Austin, I think, will be one of the top guys. In my mind, I think that's a slam dunk because a lot of people believe that Tavon Austin would be a great player. Nonetheless, I think Austin and Manti Te'o will be two of the top booms coming into the 2013 season.
Well, before I get to my booms, I've just got to ask you, the Notre Dame-Alabama game, and a couple of other games where he seemed to struggle in coverage. You're not worried about that?
Well, Luke Kuechly struggled in coverage. Many people believe he's a top 75 player in the league. Rookie season as well. I mean, we'll definitely see, but for the moment, Manti Te'o, I think, will be a huge talent in the NFL.
Okay, well, I have two guys of my own. First, since I never claimed to have any originality, Tavon Austin, and here's why. The future of the NFL are people who can be plugged in multiple capacities, not just multiple positions, but could be used in the slot, outside the numbers, coming out of the backfield, in the wildcat, just could be used in about a dozen different formations. And that's what you get with Tavon Austin. There's a reason he jumped from the low 20s to number 8 in the span of a week or two. He has the skills, the speed, and the toughness to really shift around the football field. And that's going to give the Rams somebody they can really utilize. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they can do that. But my number 2 guy, who's going to be a pleasant surprise, since I'm contractually obligated to choose an offensive lineman, how about Eric Fisher, Kansas City Chiefs? Now, I think the Chiefs and the Jaguars with Luke Jokel did the smart thing. In an underwhelming draft like this, you can do 2 things with a top pick. You can either take a guaranteed single or double and realize that you're not going to get your franchise quarterback, or you can chance everything for the 20% chance you're going to hit a home run with a guy like Geno Smith at the number 1 pick. I thought the Chiefs and the Jaguars would try to hit the home run because, let's be honest, they don't have exactly a stellar history of management, but I'm pleasantly surprised to find out that they didn't. They didn't overthink it. The team picking first took the best player in the draft, and the team picking second took the guaranteed second best player in the draft. That's how it should be. Both of them have proven track records, and even though nobody's talking about them, I feel like they are going to be a pleasant surprise, even if nobody but Chiefs and Jaguars fans notice.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I believe that team fits certainly play somewhat of a role in a team's success, I think the Chiefs and Jaguars are the great thing because who isn't going to deny a guy that's going to play for them for the next 10 or 12 years? That's what the Dolphins did with Jake Long. Obviously, my argument ends with the fact that he moved on to the Rams. Point is, you get a very solid player at the offensive line in a passing league. The fact that you can plug in a left or right tackle who can play either or. Eric Fisher and Luke Jokel can play either or. They're obviously the teams have certain they have a certain expectation for those players. But if you're gonna draft a guy, you certainly want, for the most part, whether you believe that you're going to hit a guy, you're going to hit a home run with someone else, you take the guarantee money and you get a guy who's going to play for you for the next 10 or 12 years.
Absolutely. Well, that just about ends our show. I'm going to throw it back to you to wrap up. But before I do, I've got to mention that for all of our sports broadcasting camp audience out there, I'm going to be in Boston next week. And Nick, I presume, will be in L.A. in 2 weeks when that starts. Are you?
In a couple weeks. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, hold on one second. We seem to have a caller on the line. Hello?
Yes, we got a caller.
Oh, hey. Actually, can you hold on one second?
Sure.
Sorry about that. Actually, we're going to have to wrap up the show here. Thank you guys for joining us. Sorry to end the show early, but we'll definitely see you guys next week. We'll be back.
I was getting all excited. I thought we had, our second caller ever.
I know. Sorry about that, man. But we'll definitely try to have a caller for next week. Thank you guys for listening. NFL Goal Line Live with Nick and Andrew. Catch us next week, Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for listening again, and we'll see you guys.
7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, man. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you guys for joining us.
All right, so long, everyone.